I guess there's the number one thing for me when I think of continuous improvement, it's really about people and processes.
Welcome to another episode. It's Chris here, and today I'm joined by Paul Nadolski, Continuous Improvement Manager at Kerry. Thanks for making time to join us today on an episode of Digitization Mavericks. So, as we get started, let's wind it back for a second so listeners out there get to know you a little better. What brought you to manufacturing, and how have you found your way into your current role at Kerry?
Yeah, that's a good question because my original undergrad is in journalism, so it is kind of weird that I wound up in manufacturing. I guess the long story short of it is I was in the Army National Guard and I did a deployment. And when I came back home, I saw what journalists were making, and then I was offered a position in manufacturing, and I kind of weighed the pros and cons, and I decided to kind of hop into manufacturing. It had a lot of similarities. There's a lot of SOPs in manufacturing, so I was kind of already used to having a rule book. And I get reminded on a monthly basis from a lot of people like, "Hey, former military does well in ops." So I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's me. I understand. I get what you're saying." So that's kind of how I kind of got into ops. It was like it kind of made sense. I felt like where I was in my life, I was at a point where I wanted to make a little bit more money than I would have right out of college. So I was like, let's get into manufacturing.
Awesome. So yeah, non-linear path, but a lot of transferable skills. That's awesome to see. How have you seen technology improve the common workflows in continuous improvement and have those lead to advances in manufacturing in your career?
Yeah, I've seen technology help a lot in manufacturing, but I want to take one step back and just say I think building skills helps the most. So if you bring in a new technology, you have to make sure you understand why you're bringing it in first. Because if you just bring it in and you haven't built a skill set or you haven't built like good habits, then the technology is not going to help you. So technology can help transform the workplace, but if you don't build the habits and you don't know why it's there, then it can actually be a detriment. So you have to make sure you're following a good implementation process and you have to have the idea behind why. And like for example, when I was at a previous position, we were implementing a total productive manufacturing process. And we didn't have any of the information we needed digitally. So I had to form with the team to figure out how to get our operational equipment efficiency. So that would be three metrics where we have to get availability, we have to get quality, we have to get performance. So we figured out how we wanted to get all of those metrics. And eventually, about 18 months later, working with our IT team and all of that, we were able to get it all done digitally. So every day we didn't have to record it in books anymore. We had it all ready for us. It saved us a ton of time. But if we didn't do all that work up front and we just had somebody come in and make us a program, if we realized we had the wrong data or we were grabbing the wrong subset of information, it's a lot harder to change code than it is to change what you're recording on a piece of paper. So I guess that's kind of like my cautionary tale is it will help you, but you need to know what you want it to do first.
Yeah, absolutely. That why and then linking the use to that benefit is huge in adoption. I think you hit it nail on the head there. So having said that, what's the ultimate worst nightmare for someone in your seat as a continuous improvement manager?
I guess there's the number one thing for me when I think of continuous improvement, it's really about people and processes. So for me, my number one nightmare would be if there was a team of people who were unengaged with wanting to make any sort of change and were uninterested in it. And, even you could follow all the techniques, follow all of those good communication styles. But my nightmare would be if I had a team that was unwilling to listen to any of those things because you can find ways to get the data you need. You can find ways to get the tools you need, but it's a lot harder to find the right attitudes.
Yeah, you got it. So you must hate hearing this is the way we've always done it with no further explanation why.
I'd never like hearing it, but it is funny. The older I get, the less it irritates me, as it did like 5, 6 years ago. Because I guess maybe it's just as you get a little older, you're like, I understand that. There are things I just don't want to change, but I've just accepted change as a part of life. So, if you could make it personal to people, because really, I mean, as more technology comes in, then I think the number one skill set in leaders is really going to be empathy. If you're not able to relate to people and to explain to them why you're doing something, then it's not going to get done. So if you can give those real life examples, maybe not always work, but how change can be beneficial, that's how you can try and get those people on board.
Yeah, it's a lot hard. They say it's a lot harder to train an old dog new tricks. So I think you're right. The empathy and how to get everybody involved with that is key. So, as a manager, have you guys shifted to digital for areas like training assignments and tracking who's been trained on what within the plant? Or are you still managing that through paper and spreadsheets currently?
Yeah, so really, like the core training that like everyone has to do, that is, throughout the entire Kerry company, that is tracked digitally. We have a system, people log into it, it tracks if you have done the training or not. So for the full blown, rehab, the trainings built for it, it's tracked like that. Then there are other trainings that are very specific. And what we'll do for those ones is there are going to be sign in rosters. Now, most of the time, we're going to implement that into one of our tracking systems so that Kerry corporate and anyone can see who's completed the trainings. But those aren't automatically done like for the ones that are completely company wide.
Got it. So, site specific thing will still change a bit, but corporate wide for any standard training that's already standardized.
Yes, yeah, we have this a standard tool that we use. Like we just had a new hire start this week, and on Monday she worked from home to do all of the standard training that's going to be recorded through that system.
That's awesome. So, cutting that onboarding time into a small fragment of probably what it was before.
Yeah, and then also, why make that person drive into work to sit in a room by themselves? I mean,
And read
they
stuff,
could do that
basically.
at
Yeah.
home. Yeah, they could do that at home. You don't have to come into work to do that. So it's kind of like a nice first day because it's like, oh, I can make a cup of coffee, I can relax, and talk to a couple HR reps. But I'm getting all my mandatory trainings done.
You got it. How did you first get introduced to the idea of digital transformation, a term which has become so popular today as a result of paperless SOPs, automation, and continuous improvement goals? When did you first hear that?
Yeah, I mean, it would probably have been around 5, 6 years ago when I was at another flavor company, and we really, that's when the term like Internet of Things and all of that started to become all of the buzzwords and the catchphrases. And we were trying to figure out what can we do to reduce how much paperwork we have on the floor. We're asking operators to do. What can we transfer to our ERP system? What can we do to make it so it's not as manual of a process of they have to mark this as they move along. So that's kind of when I first heard of it.
That's awesome. So when you've identified a need for technology because the current process, like you mentioned, going paperless is no longer cutting it, how do you go about looking for an option for that change? What's your process look like there?
Yeah. Generally speaking, I will always want to follow like some sort of 8 step, problem solving process. Whichever company I'm at, I'll kind of morph to the one that they have set the standard for. Or when I'm really lucky, I might be at a place that doesn't have a standard, so then I can get to create it, which is even more fun. But I like to, what's the actual problem? Make sure we define the problem. The biggest, um, I don't want to say mistake, but the biggest thing I see people do is they have a solution in mind and they haven't defined the problem. So maybe that solution is going to create more problems. So it's really okay, we need to define the problem. Do we have the correct people together to solve that problem? Let's use some problem solving tools, whether it's If it's a fishbone, 5Y, or pick whichever one is your favorite, do that. And then, I also love an impact effort matrix. What's the most we can get with the least amount of effort? And then use that to then decide what we're going to do. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn out process. Just follow the steps. Make sure you don't skip a step so that you can ensure that you're making the best decision that you can.
Got it. So if you indicate that there's a gap where your existing solutions don't fit in and you're looking for a new solution that you can create, that you can develop, what's the process look like once you've identified that problem and you've figured out what we want to achieve? How do you go about finding that solution?
Yeah, well, the number one thing I think everyone always needs to accept when they're in this role is they're not an expert. If you're in a continuous improvement manager role, you're not an expert. You need to be the person who knows which expert to go to, because it's like, the knowledge is a mile wide but a foot deep instead of the foot wide and a mile deep. So like if we're going to look to do like automating packaging of a line, I need to make sure I get the right engineer. I need to get the operators who will be working on that line. Like, what do you need to make this successful? So it's getting the right people in the room after doing that problem solving step. And then if it's gonna, you need to figure out the cost. Each company has its own thresholds. Is this a capital project? Is this something I can just go put on the company card? Is this a we can fix it in a week, a month? Do I need to do a return on investment? So you need to know your own thresholds. If your company says 10 million is capital, okay. If it's under 10 million, there's another process. If it's under, a 5,000, you can just go buy it. So make sure you know your company's outlines and then learn what they want as an ROI. But those would be all kind of those next steps.
Absolutely. So engaging with those subject matter experts. Switching gears here a bit, do you have an abnormality reporting approach? If so, what do you classify as an abnormality? And how do you train staff on how to tag them?
So just for clarification, do you mean like when an abnormality happens, like out on the production floor to make sure we're aware of it, or a different style of reporting than normal?
Exactly. So, like if an operator sees something that's out of spec and they want to report this so that somebody can make a change, how do they indicate that right now? How
Okay.
do they track that?
Yeah, no. So, well, what we have now, we recently, in the last 3 months, have implemented just kind of a standard tier process system. So each department has its own tier one meeting, which is like the startup meeting where people, see how the results were from yesterday, get the plan for today. But we also have our what we call problem follow up cards. So what those are is when an issue comes up that's an abnormality, they could be written on that and escalated to the correct person if they weren't able to solve it on the floor themselves. And each blending room also has its own like attainment to plan board where they're writing, hey, every 2 hours we're expecting to get this. When it misses, they write the reason down on that board in a little 4C section, to see like where they are in the problem solving process. So we also then do daily floor walks to check on those boards to make sure that those things are being addressed and raised to the proper people. And then, we have the tier two meeting, which is the next level of leadership, the supervisors. And then we also have a daily tier three, which is the plant leadership meeting. So those things should be moving up and down throughout the plant. So as they're being raised, we find out about it and then we can bring the solution back down to them.
Awesome. So, at the very core of that, when the operator first finds that issue, how do they initiate that workflow? Is it they'll make a tag and then bring it to that board, or how does that process work?
Yeah, the board is directly outside their work area, so they just walk out the door and then they can write it on the board. So that's how they would start the process. Or if it was something that didn't shut their room down right then and there and they just had a good idea, the tier one boards and problem follow up cards and all that is on the main floor where their startup meeting is. So if they needed to walk over there and grab that, we are trying to make sure the tools are as close to the operators as possible so that they can report those issues. Because really, at the end of the day, like if I'm not here for a month, the production should still run. Like the core of what makes carry money is the production team, not anything. I hopefully make it a little better and a little more profitable, but they're the ones doing like the real work, and they need to make sure that the tools are right there for them.
You got it. So you've got multiple boards. That makes it really easy for the operators. For somebody in your role or somebody in the quality role, they have to walk around and see all the individual boards to get the full picture.
Yes, right now it would be walk into each room, see where those boards are at, do a loop around the whole production area to kind of get that full picture.
Got it. But like you said, the main thing is to make it easy for that operator, the frontline worker, to get that information and escalate it up the chain easily.
Yes, and what I would, love to see in the future is it would be nice to have it digital with the updates. But we just started all of this, like I said, 3 months or so ago. So what I would like to do right now is take these next 5, 6 months, build the habit. We've already identified on those boards things we'd like to change. And these boards were purchased a little bit before I started, and the boards are a little over $1,000. So I'm like, I'm going to buy markers, maybe not magnets, and cover up the stuff we want to change. So like when this does, and that's goes back to my previous point. I do want to eventually have everything digital, but right now we can make whatever adjustments we want to these boards. So let's get them right. Let's make sure it has the information we want to have, and then it would be great to have a spot where they can update it, and we can look at it anywhere. Don't necessarily have to walk on the floor, but there is a part of me that believes in having the manual process of writing it and forcing people on the floor to see it. It's the whole idea of Gemba, on the spot. Because sometimes if you make it easy to not go out there, you won't go out there and you lose focus of where the company is making money.
Absolutely. In your picture of your future vision of how this works, you're on step one. And I think what you're talking about there is like step 3 or 4. So you have to get the process
Yeah.
going before you can start introducing these changes to improve upon it.
Yeah. Yes,
So
for sure.
aside from those boards, what else do you use in your role to detect inefficient processes?
No, that is a really good question. So give me 1 second to think about that one.
Sure.
All right. So I think the number one thing we can do is one, engage with the operators. And I don't mean just through the board, go out there and ask them, hey, when you're doing this, what do you run into? So that could also just be observing the whole process. I want to go watch a changeover from start to finish. What is running? What are you running into as a problem? So that part with operator engagement, finding those problems, that's very time consuming, but it's very beneficial to building the relationships. Then there's also the data aspect of it. If we can go look at, hey, here are all the clean and all the changeovers for the past month, where are the outliers, and dig into why those are outliers, and figure those out so that those outliers get fewer and fewer. That's another way to go about it. Just the classic, data analysis. So that's probably two of the ways that I like to go and kind of find those problems without it just being raised through the tier system.
No, I agree. I think that one-on-one interaction where you build that relationship, you can uncover further details than you'd get just by looking at a piece of data. And I think both of those are really important to understand the qualitative as well as the quantitative measures there. It seems like your team at Kerry is hiring right now. So this is a question you might get asked during the interview process. What's your take on people losing jobs as a result of tech as someone who understands the role that technology is playing in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's a question that has plagued humanity throughout history. When sewing machines were made, some people didn't want to use them because they were like, well, what are the people we've hired to sew going to do? But I think what some people also don't think about is what are the new jobs being created by that technology? I mean, 70 years ago, there wasn't an IT department. Now there's IT, there's coders, there's what we're doing right now. So, yes, maybe one way of doing things isn't done that way anymore, but that means that there'll be a new opportunity because with every new technology comes a new opportunity, and we just might not know it yet, but it's going to appear.
Yeah, so I think the old saying goes that every robot you put on the floor takes away one job, but it creates two because now you've got a robot tech, you've got a controls engineer, you've got a mechanical designer. It
Hmm.
just changes what those roles are.
Exactly.
What excites you about working in manufacturing today?
No, that's an excellent question. And I think it's really like I'm very excited to be in the food industry. I had like a little break in the from the food industry, so I worked at a flavor house for like 5 years, went into paint for a little bit, and then I was like, I want to get back into food, and came back to a flavor house, and I there's just something about working on the product that all everyone's going to use. There isn't people are, what we make here is goes on to meat, and even if you're a vegetarian, we make the stuff that goes on like veggie burgers. We also make the stuff that goes on snacks. So if you're ever eating any of those, if you like stuff that are Cheez-It-esque or Cheeto-esque, or if you ever buy meat products, we're making it. And it's like that's really cool. I can go to the store and I can be like, hey, this came from our plant or it came from the Kerry family. And I don't know, it's just seeing just in my limited time in manufacturing, I'm almost at a decade into it, but just seeing the changes and really it's really interesting. It's fascinating just seeing how much more automation is coming into it, how much more it's now people focused, than it used to be. It used to be more we just need headcount. Now it's no, we need to actually build relationships with people and make sure that we're you know keeping the people who are doing well. So I think that's probably what draws me to it is the ever changing environment and the ability to meet a lot of people because I'm an extrovert, so I love that I can go out on the floor every day and talk to people all day. So that's probably the two biggest ones, just seeing the rapid changes and the ability to work with a lot of people.
All right, last couple of questions. Where can our listeners find you if they'd like to connect or apply for one of the various positions you're hiring for at Kerry?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to find me, I'm on uh, Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. It's me, so you just have to look for Paul Nadolski, Paulnadolski, and you'll be able to find me. For Kerry, if you go to our main website, kerry.com, and go to careers and then search for US Wisconsin Sturtevant, you'll be able to see the openings we have here. But I mean, if anyone saw this and was interested and you send me a direct message on LinkedIn, I'd be able to get you in contact with the right person here, for whatever opening you may be interested in.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Paul. That pretty much wraps up this episode of Digitization Mavericks. Thanks, Paul, for your time, and looking forward to seeing you guys at the next episode.